Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Air Raid Saturdays College Football YouTube channel. I am your host, Justin Perez, and this is the first, major video that I post here on this channel. This is gonna kick off a long and exciting ride, I hope, for this channel. And this is gonna be fun. So what I'm doing here today is this is gonna start or kick off the my predictions for every single FBS team before we head into the 2023 college football season. As far as how I'm going to be doing these videos, I'm going to be doing a video per conference, which means I'll do a video specifically for the ACC teams, then I'll do the next one on the Big Ten, and so on and so on. So in this video today, we're going to be talking about the ACC teams and its 14 schools that are in this conference and where I see each of these teams going in the 2023 season. Just a quick disclaimer here, a lot of these games that you will see me predict, you might not agree with what games I'm predicting a team to win and lose. However, it is very difficult to predict games for a team when they have a lot of opponents on their schedule that they could either win or lose against. So without further ado, let me go and hop right into the first team here, and that's the Boston College Eagles. Now, Boston College is coached by Jeff Hafley. He's in his fourth year at BC. He has a 15-20 overall record. Everything for Hafley was going pretty well to start his tenure at Boston College. Went to a bowl game or a couple bowl games to start his to start his tenure off at Boston College, and then over the last couple years, Boston College has just been struggling. Last season, they finished 3-9 and 2-6 in the ACC. They have a lot of questions surrounding their roster this season. However, I don't think their roster is bad enough or bleak enough to not make a bowl game. It is possible for Boston College to make a bowl game, but we're going to have to see how things play out. Boston College has some interesting players coming this season. Starting off with the offense, they're going to get a brand new full-time starting quarterback and sophomore Emmett Morehead. Now, Morehead took over for Phil Jurkovich last season, and he was pretty decent. He wasn't amazing, obviously. As a freshman quarterback getting some playing time at the Division I level, it's going to be a little rocky. He's going to have some flashes. He's going to show some flashes, but he's also going to have a lot of bad mistakes, and that's exactly what happened to Emmett Morehead this season. Or last season, excuse me. That's exactly what happened to him last season. But he should be better this season if the offensive line can hold up. The offensive line's headlined by a couple of key transfers, and also senior guard Christian Mahogany. Mahogany's obviously coming back for his senior season, and he's obviously the best player on the offensive line. But you also got to look at sophomore center Drew Kendall, as well as senior offensive guard Kyle Hergel, who comes over from Texas State. I believe he comes over from Texas State. I didn't obviously write most of this down. I do know he is a transfer, though. Kyle Hergel is a transfer. He's going to have some solid options. Morehead is going to have some solid weapons. He has Ryan O'Keefe coming in from UCF, who's a solid wide receiver. He's heading into his senior year this season. And then you also got to look at senior tight end George Takis. I believe that's how you pronounce his name. Takis is also a productive tight end. He's one of the better pass-catching tight ends in the ACC. And then when it comes to the defense, they also have some intriguing players to look at, including the junior defensive end Donovan Izirawaku. Izirawaku is going to headline that front on the defensive line. He's one of the best pass rushers, and he's one of the best players getting into the opposing backfield in the ACC. So he's a guy to look on. And then you also have a couple of intriguing linebackers, being headlined by seniors Vinny DePalma and Cam Arnold. And then also, you have an interesting group of defensive backs that are obviously being led by senior cornerback Elijah Jones. So there's a lot of promising pieces for Boston College. It's not like the season's going to be a total flop. I don't believe that at all. I think they're going to be fairly competitive in their games this season, and almost all their games this season, with the exception of a few games that I will be pointing out as we're going through the schedule. But it is possible for them to get to a bowl game. Now, as far as their schedule is concerned, they have a decently tough for their standards, they have a decently tough non-conference schedule, but it's something that they should not be able to overcome. It is possible that they win all four of their non-conference games. Those non-conference games are in order: against Northern Illinois, Holy Cross, at Army, and versus UConn. Three of those non-conference games are at home. So we'll see how that goes. Now, to start the season, I have them starting off with a 2-0 record. Their first game is on September the 2nd against Northern Illinois at home. That's the first non-conference game. This is a game that I feel like people should be looking at. Like I said, I know Boston College has some talent, and they're not going to be a pushover for most teams in the ACC this season. But it's not like they're invincible. And this is one of those teams that could have a hiccup in a non-conference schedule that seems relatively easy. Now, Northern Illinois, they're going to be a talented football team last season. Obviously, last season, Northern Illinois wasn't really all that good, but they had to deal with a lot of injuries, including to their starters on offense. They lost quarterback Rocky Lombardi. They lost one of their top wide receivers last season. I believe they finished 3-9 or 4-8 last year. But I feel like Northern Illinois, they're going to bounce back. They're going to have a good year in 2023. And I feel like they're going to be really competitive in this game against Boston College. I expect Boston College to start slow offensively, especially with all the new parts and all the transfers coming in. But I do think that they can win this game, and I actually picked them to win this game. Although I wouldn't be shocked if they actually lose to Northern Illinois. But I'm giving them a win, and then I'm also going to give them an easy dub against Holy Cross. Again, Holy Cross comes from the FCS level, and I don't even think they've been that good. To be honest, I don't follow the FCS all too much. But I don't think they were that good last year, so I'll give them a win against Holy Cross as they always beat them. Now, this is where things start to get dicey. The ACC play starts in Week 3 when they're at home on September the 16th against Florida State. Remember I mentioned how they did not have top ACC teams like Clemson or North Carolina. However, this is the one conference game that they have to play where they're playing against a team that's light years ahead of Boston College. I don't think Boston College has a chance in this game, and as a result, I'm giving them a loss. And then I'm giving them a loss the next week on the road at Louisville. That's a 50-50 game. That could go either way, but I'm just giving them a loss because I feel like they're going to have hiccups pretty much anywhere on this ACC schedule. So I'll give them a loss. So they're 2-2, but then they receive a break as they're playing Virginia, who in my opinion is the worst team in the ACC this season. On September 30th, they're at home. I expect Boston College to win that one, and they're going to be 3-2 heading into the game on October 7th against Army. Now, this game's on the road, and if you know anything about, the military academy teams, Army, Navy, and Air Force, is that they're very difficult to prepare for, and that's especially the case when it comes to the Army Black Knights. And I feel like Army's game plan and, their offense, like I said, is very difficult to prepare for, and I think it might give Boston College fits. Now, I'm going to give them a loss against Army, as you see on the screen now, but this could be a game where Boston College wins. Again, this is not a game where Boston College will not have a chance to win. They will have a chance to win this game. It's just a matter of, are they going to be prepared enough to go against that Army triple option style offense. But we'll see how that goes. I'm not going to be shocked if Army pulls off this win, and I'm not going to be shocked if Boston College pulls off this win. I'm just saying that I'm going to give this game to Army, and I'm going to have Boston College get dropped to 3-3 before the bye week, which is on October 14th, and then they come back on October 21st on the road at Georgia Tech, and Georgia Tech is supposed to be one of the worst teams in the ACC, but it's not like they're Virginia or Virginia Tech. I believe that Georgia Tech will be competitive in a lot of their games this season. Remember, they finished last season winning four of their last 8 games. In 2022, they had a decent finish to last season. And I believe this season, they're going to come in with a little bit of more confidence, and they're going to be able to win a lot of games or have the chance to win games against teams that really seem better than them. And I believe that Boston College will get a hiccup here, and they'll drop to 3-5. Although I have them picking up a win the next week at home against UConn. Again, UConn, they're not going to be the regular pushover like they were in years past. They're going to, they obviously made it to a bowl game last year. They're very improved. And I see them to be competitive, but I'll have Boston College to win that game. Then I see them losing on the road against Syracuse to drop them to 4-5, and then I have them winning versus Virginia Tech on November 11th. So I have them at 5-5 heading into the last two games of the season. The last two games of the season are on a Thursday and a Friday, respectively. Now, after that Virginia Tech game, they have a really short week as they got to fly to Pittsburgh on, the next Thursday night, and I see them picking up a loss in that game due to the short week. And then in the final game against Miami, they need a win to become bowl eligible, and I see them losing that game. Like I said, I'm not that confident in Boston College's ability to make a bowl game this season, but it's very possible. And a lot of these games that I picked as losses for them could go the other way, and they could win a lot of those games. So we'll see what happens for Boston College. But I'm projecting them to finish 5-7 in the ACC, or 5-7 overall, and 2-6 in the ACC. Now let's transition over to the team that's projected by many to be the best team in this conference, the class of this conference, the Clemson Tigers. Now, Clemson's obviously head coached by Dabo Swinney. He's going into his 16th season at Clemson, and at the moment he has a record of 161 wins and 39 losses. Last season, Clemson, they were so close to making the college football playoff again, but a couple late season losses, especially a loss in that last game to South Carolina, really screwed them over. But they went winless in conference play. They finished 9-0. They beat North Carolina for the ACC Championship, but then they lost the Orange Bowl to Tennessee last year. Now, like I said, last season they had some, bad losses to Notre Dame and South Carolina that ruined their playoff chances. However, they could get back to that this season, obviously, because they have a phenomenal collection of talent that starts with linebacker Jeremiah Trotter and Barrett Carter. They're going to be manning what may be the best linebacking core in all of college football in 2023. They also have some other weapons on defense, including defensive tackle Rook Orororo, who's a senior, and junior defensive back Nate Wiggins, along with junior safety Andrew Mukuba. And you also got to have, again, a couple eyes on defensive tackle Tyler Davis and safety Jalen Phillips. And on offense side of the ball, they're going to be handing the reins fully over to Cabe Klubnik, who's a sophomore this year. Similar to Emmett Moorhead of Boston College, he had some struggles, but he showed a lot of promise, and he could be a really productive quarterback. And then you also have Will Shipley, who's a phenomenal running back, who's coming back as a junior. And you also got to look at the offensive line that's going to give this Clemson offense lots of opportunities to put up tons of points, as they always are. This offensive line is going to be really good, and they're headlined by the man in the middle, the senior center, Will Putnam. Now, they have a tough schedule. They have 5 top ACC teams, including Notre Dame and South Carolina, as non-conference games. However, it's not like it's reasonable to think that they could overcome that. I think a reasonable expectation for them will be 9-12 wins. I actually have them going undefeated this season, as you can see on the on your screen here. Now, they're going to beat Duke. They're going to beat Charleston Southern. They're going to beat FAU. They're going to be 3-0. Now, this Florida State game on September the 23rd is going to be a tight one. They could lose that game, but I see them winning the regular season matchup. Then I see them getting over Syracuse, Wake Forest to be 6-0 heading into their bye week. And then I see them beating Miami, North Carolina State to be 8-0. And then I see them getting revenge over Notre Dame. I believe they are a better team than Notre Dame. It's just facts. That's just what I believe in. And if anything, if you compare both teams, then Clemson's probably better on paper. But anyway, I have them beating Notre Dame. They're going to blow out Georgia Tech. They're going to beat North Carolina again. Even though North Carolina is really good, they're not on the level of Clemson. The only other team that I see being on the level of Clemson is Florida State, which we'll get to soon enough. And then I see them finishing the season off with a revenge game on the road in Columbia. I see them beating South Carolina to finish the regular season 12-0 and 8-0 in the ACC, which automatically guarantees them a berth in the ACC Championship game. Now, transitioning over to the next team, this is a very promising team, a team that has a lot of questions, but a lot of intriguing players to it, and that's the Duke Blue Devils. Now, Duke is head coached by Mike Elko. This is going to be his second year at Duke. Last season was his first year, and my goodness, last season he proved himself to be a phenomenal head coach for the Duke Blue Devils. In 2022, Duke ended up finishing the season 9-4, 5-3 in the ACC, and they won the Military Bowl against UCF. Last season was only the third time in Duke's history where they've reached at least 9 wins. This team is talented enough to reach the 9-win plateau again, but it's going to be very difficult as they have a lot of tough games on their schedule this season. They got to play Clemson. They got to play Notre Dame. They got to play Florida State. They got to play North Carolina State. Wake Forest is a game that they could lose. They got to play North Carolina. And also Pittsburgh the last week of the season. Pittsburgh is also a game that they might have struggles in. As you can see by my predictions on the right side of this screen, I see them losing 5 games this season. Now, we'll get into the schedule in just a bit, but I think a realistic expectation for this team is going to be 5 to 8 wins. Like I said, it's possible for this team to reach 9 wins again, but I don't see that happening with this schedule that they have. If they didn't have a lot of the top teams in the ACC, then I would be like, this team could reach 9 to 10 wins. But they don't play Virginia Tech, so I can't say with the certain that they're going to be able to reach the 9 wins. We'll see. They also do not play Georgia Tech. If they play Georgia Tech and Virginia Tech, then it would have been like, you know what, this team could reach 9 wins again. But they don't play those teams. They play a lot of tougher competition than last season. Now, when it comes to the players that you should keep an eye on, definitely got to keep an eye on 2 main guys for me. Or at least 3 main guys, because you got to talk about the quarterback. On offense, it's going to come down to Riley Leonard Jr. He had a phenomenal year last year. And to be honest with you, a lot of his top weapons are going to be returning this year. He has senior wide receiver Jalen Calhoun. He has senior running back Jordan Waters. I believe Duke is returning three of their 4 top receivers from last season. They also have a solid defensive core that's headlined by senior defensive tackle Dwayne Carter. I believe that this Duke team is going to be very competitive. Offensive line-wise, they have Jacob Monk, who can pretty much play anywhere on the line, anywhere on the interior. He could play both guard and center. But then you also have senior offensive tackle and all ACC performer Graham Barton. He's going to be a guy to check on this season. You also have safety Jalen Stinson and sophomore cornerback Chandler Rivers. Duke had a couple losses in their secondary last season. Now it's time for those young guys with a little bit less experience to come in and step up. So those are guys that you got to be aware about when it comes to Duke. Now, when it comes to their schedule, their season starts on a Monday night in week 1 at home against Clemson. And, we just talked about Clemson. Duke could be competitive. We can see how good they are, but I don't think they're going to win this game. But then I see them winning their next 3 games against Lafayette, Northwestern, and on the road at UConn. Lafayette is an FCS team. They should win that game handily. Northwestern, they're going to be worse. They're going to be one of the worst teams in the country this season. And to be honest, there's so much bad stuff going around that program that I don't see Northwestern coming out of that, at least in 2023. They're going to be one of the worst teams in the Big Ten this season. That's a win. Then UConn, they're not going to be an easy out like in previous years, but Duke has more talent than them, and I see them being the UConn Huskies. Now, they have one more game before the bye week on October 7th, and that last game is on September the 30th against Notre Dame at home. Although this game is at home, I just don't see how Duke can beat Notre Dame. Now, I gotta be honest, I do not like Notre Dame. And that's putting it lightly. And as a fan, I would love to see Duke win this game, but, you gotta look at the realistic side here, and I don't see how Duke is gonna win this game against Notre Dame. So heading into the bye week, I have Duke at a 3-2 record. Then coming out of the bye week, they're gonna get a win against North Carolina State on October 14th. I have a lot of questions for North Carolina State this year, and I think Duke is going to be seasoned enough on both sides of the ball where they're going to be able to beat some of these teams in the ACC that will be at the higher echelon of the conference. So I do see them beating North Carolina State. Then I see them losing to Florida State. That's a road game. Florida State, I think they're the second best team in this conference. Heading into the season, they're going to lose that game. So now all of a sudden, you're in a situation where they're 4-3. 4-3. But there we go. I got back-to-back wins against Louisville on the road and a Thursday game against Wake Forest. So now they're 6-3 and bowl eligible. Then I see them losing to North Carolina. I feel like North Carolina has a little bit more talent than Duke does, and I feel like they're a little bit more of a better team than Duke is, and I feel like the Tar Heels are going to win that game. Then I see them beating Virginia easily, and then in the last game of the season, I do see them having some struggles against that Pittsburgh defense, and I see them finishing the season with a 7-5 record, finishing 500 in the ACC. Overall, not bad for Duke. It could be possible that they get more wins, a few more wins. Again, you look at a game against North Carolina, you look at the game against Pittsburgh, and you could say those are two winnable games right there. Hell, I would even say they even have a chance against Notre Dame if everything goes right. But again, those are the key words. They have a chance against Notre Dame if everything goes right, which I don't think that will be the case. But still, solid season for Duke I see happening. I don't see them slipping at all. They're going to be a solid team in the ACC. Next, when it comes to Florida State, this is Florida State's year to really be competitive in the ACC. Now, they're head coach by Mike Norvell. He's entering his 4th year at Florida State with an 18-16 record. Now, Florida State under Norvell, they started off really bad with Norvell, but as most is the case, by the 3rd year of a coaching regime, players start to get used to the system more. They start bringing in better talent. And as a result, Florida State had a breakout season last year, finishing with a record of 10 wins and 3 losses and finishing 5-3 in the ACC. And they even won the Cheez-It Bowl against crappy Oklahoma. Oklahoma was really bad last season, but they were in a tightly contested game. I think Florida State won 35-32 in the Cheez-It Bowl, but they won that game. Now, heading into this season, looking at their schedule, they're going to have a really, they have 2 tough non-conference opponents against LSU and Florida, but they also have 2 other doable non-conference games against Southern Miss and North Alabama. They have a favorable ACC schedule, and the only, powerhouse team that they play during the conference season is Clemson. So it's possible that they could win 7 of their 8 games in ACC play, and it's also possible that they could go undefeated in ACC play. Now, we just went over Clemson, and I said that they will go undefeated, which means that they will beat Florida State, and I think Florida State will lose that game, but we'll get into that in a little bit. Looking at their players this season, their offense is going to be dynamite I think they have a nice 3-headed monster in senior quarterback Jordan Travis, junior wide receiver Johnny Wilson, and solid running back, junior running back, who I believe is poised for a really good season this year in Trey Benson. They also have another target in security blanket tight end, Jaheim Bell. They also have a solid defense that's led by defensive end Jared Verse, and cornerbacks Fentrell Cypress, who is a junior, then 2 senior defensive tackles in Fabian Lovett and Braden Fisk. And they also have a senior safety that's really important to the secondary, and that's Akeem Dent. Now, when it comes to their schedule, I see them losing to Florida State. I believe that game is being played in Orlando. I don't remember. I have to double check. But either way, whether it's at home, on the road, or in a neutral site, I don't see it. Florida State. I mean, Florida State could beat LSU. They beat them last year on the blocked extra point in week 1. But I see LSU getting revenge, and I see them beating Florida State this year to knot that up at 1-1, at 1 game apiece. But I see them getting 2 easy wins the next 2 weeks, at home against Southern Miss and on the road against Boston College. Then obviously we brought up that Clemson game. I believe that that they will lose that game. So they're 2-2 heading into the bye week. But as you can see, they will win their last 8 games of the season, in my opinion. They'll stomp Virginia Tech. They'll beat Syracuse. They'll beat Duke. They'll beat Wake Forest on the road. I believe they're going to have a tough game against Pittsburgh because, a Pittsburgh team that, is coached by Pat Narduzzi, they're always going to have a tough defense, and I believe that the defense will pose some challenges for Florida State, but I see them winning that game. I see them beating Miami. I see them stomping North Alabama. I don't think North Alabama has a chance in hell to beat Florida State. North Alabama is an FCS team. And FCS teams When they usually play a top FBS team, they get absolutely demolished, and that's going to happen. And then I see them beating Florida this year. Now, I believe that I think that Florida State lost to Florida this season, but I believe Florida State's going to be on another level, and they're going to be vying for a college football playoff berth. So I see Florida State finishing 10-2 and 7-1 in the ACC. Next, we move on to a team that is not so good, and that's Georgia Tech. The Yellow Jackets are coached by Brent Key, who's in his second year, and he took over after they fired Coach Jeff Collins last year, and Brent Key was able to win 4 of his 8 games when he was the head coach, and as a result, Georgia Tech finished 5-7 last year and 500 in the ACC conference play. Now, when looking at their schedule, it's going to be really tough to think that they can even get to a bowl game, but it is possible. 2 wins this season should come in the non-conference slate, and then you have a collection of really tough opponents in conference play, which include games against Louisville, North Carolina, Clemson, and Wake Forest. At least on the bright side, they don't have to play Florida State, but they got to play against North Carolina and Clemson. Realistic expectations, if you're asking me, I believe that the realistic expectation should be for this team to get anywhere between from 3 to 6 wins. Now, as you see here, I see them finishing with a 4-8 record and 2-6 in the ACC. Now, it's not to say that this team does not have talent, because they do have some intriguing players, but there's a lot of questions on this roster right now, including who's going to be the starting quarterback. Haynes King is a junior who's projected to be the starter. I believe he comes over from Texas A&M, but he never really got a lot of chance. He never really got a lot of chances to play at Texas A&M, and there's also another intriguing option at the quarterback position that Georgia Tech could go with, and that's with redshirt freshman Zach Pyron. And Zach Pyron, he's a good young quarterback as well. He can sling it. He has a little bit of mobility, and he has a really strong arm. So it's really I don't know who's gonna start. Haynes King is expected to start if you look on OurLads.com on their depth chart, I believe. But we'll find out who gets to start this team. Although I will believe that Haynes King will be the starter just because he is the junior, and he sat a lot of time on the bench. He learned. I believe he'll be named the starter, but I would not be surprised if they go with the redshirt freshman Zach Pryon. Now, their schedule. I see them losing on Friday September 1st in Atlanta against Louisville. Now, Atlanta, this game being, I believe this is the Chick-fil-A kickoff, which means that, this game has a little bit more of a home advantage factor for Georgia Tech since it's in Atlanta, but I don't see them beating Louisville. However, they'll get a win at South Carolina State. They'll lose the next 2 games at Ole Miss and at Wake Forest. Those are 2 really tough road games, and, their defense is just going to get slaughtered in a lot of these games, I believe. However, they go back to 2-3 with a win versus Bowling Green. Then I see them losing to Miami before the bye week, so they're 2-4. And however, I see them coming out of the bye week. They upset Boston College. Then they're going to lose to North Carolina. They'll easily beat Virginia. I don't think Virginia will even have a chance to beat Virginia Tech and Georgia Tech. And to me, they're 2 of the other 2 bad teams in this conference. So they'll have 4 wins. They'll be 4-5, but it'll just fall apart, as 2 of their last 3 games are against Clemson on the road and Georgia at home. And Georgia, the defending national champion, they're not going to have a chance. Clemson, they're not going to have a chance. Now, they could beat Syracuse, they could beat Miami, and they could beat Louisville, and they could beat Wake Forest. It's possible. But that's why I came up with the 3 to 6 wins for the realistic expectations. I just don't see Georgia Tech getting the bounces and the breaks in a lot of those winnable games, which is why I see them finishing 4-8. Now, when it comes to Louisville, they're going to have a lot of talent. They have Jeff Brom. He's a brand new head coach. This is his first year, and I think the Louisville faithful, they're really excited to have Jeff Brom as the coach. He's like the guy that Louisville fans wanted to be the head coach when Scott Satterfield was hired, or when Scott Satterfield was hired, everybody was like, why didn't we hire Jeff Brom? Jeff Brom is so much better. Well, and he's a hometown kid, he's from Louisville, he's whatever. Well, guess what? Now he's the head coach. Last season, under a different head coach. I believe it was Scott Satterfield. Louisville finished 8-5. They went 500 in the ACC, but they won a bowl game. They won the Fenway Bowl against Cincinnati, who fell off a cliff last season after making the college football playoff in 2021. If you look at their non-conference slate, it can produce up to 3 wins, maybe 4, but I don't see them beating Notre Dame. And the only reason why I bring that up is because Notre Dame, obviously, they always have games where they struggle against teams where they should be beating easily. I mean, they lost to Marshall last season. So, yeah, but I don't think Louisville's going to win. They have a very favorable schedule, and they do not have to play Florida State and Clemson, and they do not have to play North Carolina. So, they could get up to 8 wins, in my opinion, max. Which is why, my realistic expectations is 5 to 8 wins, and I have them finishing 7-5 once again, and 4-5 and 500 in the ACC. Now, I do see them starting off with 4 consecutive wins to begin the season. Like I said, they have that Georgia Tech game in Atlanta. Then they got to play Murray State from the FCS. They got to play crappy Indiana. And they got to play a mediocre Boston College team. I believe they can start the season with 4 straight wins. But then I see them losing on Friday, September 29th to North Carolina State. I see them losing to Notre Dame. And I see them losing on the road to Pittsburgh before the bye week, which leaves them 4-3 heading into the bye week. Now, after the bye week, I see them losing to Duke. I believe Duke is going to put up a little bit more offensive firepower than what Louisville has this season. Although, Louisville, I see their offense being decent, but a lot of their proven talent at the a lot of their talent at the skill positions that they will be depending on are unproven guys, especially at the wide receiver position. Not all of them, but a good majority of them are unproven. But then they have 2 cupcake conference games against Virginia Tech and Virginia. Even though it's a short week in between both those games, I see them beating those teams easily. I don't see Virginia winning a single conference game at all. And Virginia Tech stinks this year, or that's what people are supposed to say. So I see them with 6 wins, so that means they're bowl eligible. Then I see them losing to Miami because I got to throw in a loss in there somewhere. A lot of 50-50 games on the schedule. And then I see them beating Kentucky in the rivalry game for the Governor's Cup in the last week of the season. And I see Louisville finishing 7-5 this season. Now, when it comes to Miami, they're another team that's projected to do big things with Mario Cristobal. This is his second year at the helm. Last season, he finished 5-7 and 3-5 in the ACC. They have a lot of promising pieces. However, the offensive line needs to be a little bit better in order for junior quarterback Tyler Van Dyke to have a really good season. They have some nice pieces, but again, it's all going to depend on that offensive line to not allow a lot of sacks and allow a lot of tackles for loss. And their wide receivers are going to have to come up big. They do not have a bunch of great proven wide receivers with the exception of junior wideout Kobe Young. And, it's going to be tough, but it's possible that they do have a really good season this year. Last season, they finished 5-7, like I said. They have a good non-conference schedule facing Miami of Ohio, Bethune-Cookman, and Temple, but they also have a tough non-conference slate at home against Texas A&M, which is a team that Miami lost to last season. They have a really tough ACC schedule. They have to play North Carolina, Clemson, and Florida State, as well as North Carolina State, but they also have a lot of winnable games, and they also have Virginia on the schedule. So with that, I see them, a realistic expectation, 5 to 9 wins, and I see them finishing with the 7-5 record and 500 in the ACC, which is a huge step for a program that's been mired in mediocrity for years now. Now is who they will beat. I see them beating Miami of Ohio in the opening week of the season. That's a Friday game. Then I see them losing for the second straight year to Texas A&M. I believe Texas A&M is a better team than Miami, and I think they'll win this year as well. Then they get 2 easy wins on a Thursday night against Bethune-Cookman at home, and then on a regular Saturday against Temple on the road. So they're 3-1 heading into the bye week. Then I see them beating Georgia Tech after the bye week. So they're 4-2. Then I see them suffering back-to-back losses at North Carolina and versus Clemson. And then they beat Virginia easily. So they have 5 wins. And then they're going to lose to North Carolina State and Florida State. They're both tough road games. But then I see them finishing out strong with back-to-back wins against Louisville and at Boston College to finish the year at 7-5, and which means that they're bowl eligible. Next is a team that I believe is going to be one of the top 3 teams in the ACC this season, and that's the North Carolina Tar Heels. North Carolina is coached by Mack Brown, who's in his 5th year. He has a 30-22 record. I believe this is his 2nd stint at North Carolina. Last season, led by a phenomenal quarterback, Drake May, who was a Heisman finalist last year, or a Heisman candidate last season. They were able to go 9-5. They went 6-3 in the ACC. They lost to Clemson in the ACC title game, and they lost the title. They lost the Holiday Bowl to Oregon in sort of embarrassing fashion. Now, their non-conference slate includes some really tough matchups, including dates with South Carolina, Appalachian State, and Minnesota, but they could get up to 11 wins this season. Now, I see them finishing 9-3 and 6-2 in the ACC, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Really, the only 2 losses I see in the ACC are the game against Clemson in late November and an early season game at Pittsburgh. Now, that Pittsburgh game, they could win. It's possible. But like I said, I really like that Pittsburgh defense, and I really like Pat Narduzzi, which is why I'm giving Pittsburgh a win in that game. So I see them starting 2-2 before the bye week. They lose to South Carolina at Charlotte, and they lose to Pittsburgh. But I see them beating Appalachian State and Minnesota. Although I see them beating Appalachian State and Minnesota, those are going to be 2 really tough games because Appalachian State, man, Jesus Christ. Last season, they played in the season opener, those 2 teams, and Appalachian State took North Carolina the distance. In my opinion, that opening week game between those 2 teams was the best game in 2022 out of every other game played that year. That was a high-scoring affair that went down to the last play. It was just a fun game. That game was really tight, and I believe this match is going to be really tight. I believe Minnesota's also going to be a win, but that game's going to be tight as well. But then I see them reeling off a long streak of wins. They're going to beat Syracuse, they'll beat Miami, they'll beat Virginia, they'll beat Georgia Tech on the road. And then after that, they have an easy win against FCS Campbell. And then, like I said earlier, when I was talking about Duke, I believe that North Carolina has a little bit more firepower to beat Duke. Then they'll lose to Clemson, and then they'll beat North Carolina State on November 25th to end the year at 9-3. This team has a lot of talent, especially on offense. Like I said, we have Drake May at quarterback, but you also got to talk about Devontae Walker, the junior wide receiver, who's May's main target. He also has Bryson Nesbitt, a junior tight end, and the defense is just littered with a lot of talent, including senior linebacker Cedric Gray, junior cornerback Elijah Huzzy, junior linebacker Power Eccles, senior safety Antavius Lane, junior safety DeAndre Boykins, and plenty more. There's just so much talent and playmaking ability on that defense, and the offensive line has some pretty good players too, with Corey Gaynor at center and Willie Lampkin at offensive guard. So yeah, it's a really solid team, and I see them winning 9 games this season, but they could even get up. I can see them winning South Carolina and Pittsburgh to get up to 11 wins. It's possible for them to get 11 wins. Now we're going to talk about North Carolina's biggest rival, and that's North Carolina State. The Wolfpack of NC State under Dave Doeren. Last year they finished 8-5, and they lost the Mayo Bowl to Maryland. Now, Dave Doeren, he's well known for his really good defenses at North Carolina State. He's heading into his 11th year at North Carolina State, and he has a record of 72-54. There's 3 winnable games in the non-conference slate, but unfortunately they have to play North Carolina and Clemson. In those games, I do see them losing. But the realistic expectations, in my opinion, is that this team can go up to 10 wins if everything goes right. Now, their defense is littered with a bunch of talent. Senior linebacker Peyton Wilson, senior cornerback Shaheem Battle, junior cornerback Aiden White, junior defensive end Davin Van, junior defensive end CJ Clark, and senior linebacker Jalen Scott are just many of the really good players on this defense. However, there are questions to the offense. You're getting quarterback Brennan Armstrong. Now, Armstrong came through the transfer portal. He last played for the University of Virginia. He's a solid quarterback, but there are questions as to how he's going to handle playing in the North Carolina State system. I believe they also hired a new offensive coordinator from Virginia as well. And they were able to do a lot of good things at Virginia. They had one of the better offenses at that school for a while when he was the quarterback there, but now he's the quarterback here. Now, when their schedule opens up, I see them winning against UConn to start the season, then a loss to Notre Dame. Then they will finish the September slate 3-1 with 3 straight wins, or 4-1, with 3 straight wins against VMI, at Virginia, and Louisville. The Virginia and Louisville games are on Friday nights, and then I see them beating Marshall on October 7th. Then we have that game against Duke. Again, that's a game that they could win, but again, a lot of 50-50 games in this conference for all these teams. You got to throw in losses somewhere, and I decided that I'm going to give NC State a loss against Duke. Then they have the bye week. Then they'll lose to Clemson, obviously. I don't see them having a chance in that game. But then they'll beat Miami. They'll lose to Wake Forest. They'll beat Virginia Tech. And then they'll lose to North Carolina, as I mentioned a little while ago, to finish the season 7-5 and going bowling. It's possible that they could get to 10 wins. Again, the Notre Dame game, got to throw it out there. They could beat Duke. They could beat Wake Forest. But yeah, though, the Notre Dame, Duke, and Wake Forest games, those are games that they could win. It's just, again, let's see what happens. I just threw those losses there, and I see North Carolina State finishing 7-5. Now, when it comes to Pitt, I mentioned that they have really an intriguing team, especially on defense, as they always do. The defense, they have just a stacked secondary, man. They have a stacked secondary. They're gonna be a really good defense. And again, when you have a team that's head coached by Pat Narduzzi, you know you're gonna have good defense because he's such a phenomenal defensive coach. Now, Narduzzi is heading into his 10th year at Pitt. He has a 62-41 record. Last season they went 9-4 and 5-3 in the ACC, and they upset UCLA in the Sun Bowl. Now, their non-conference slate has 3 winnable games, but again, they gotta play Notre Dame. 6 of the 8 ACC games should be extremely winnable for them as well. They don't have to play Clemson, but they do have to play Florida State. But at least 8 of their games in the ACC, or 6 of their 8 games, should be extremely winnable for them. Now, I forgot to put a realistic expectations bar for the team, but I would say maybe up to 9 wins, possibly. Like I said, anything with this team is possible. Pitt, they've been one of the better teams in the ACC for a long time. I see them starting off 5-0. They get easy wins against Wofford and Cincinnati. Well, I don't think Cincinnati one's going to be super easy, but they'll get a win. Then they go on the road at West Virginia. They knock them off. They beat North Carolina, and they take down Virginia Tech heading into the bye week. And then I see them immediately getting bowl eligible right after the bye week with the game against Louisville. Although they start 6-0, I see them suffering 4 straight losses. They have tough road games at Wake Forest, at Notre Dame. They got to play Florida State at home. Just because you're at home, it doesn't mean that you're going to win right away. But like I said, Florida State, they're on another level this season. And then they got to play a game at the Bronx against Syracuse. So that technically counts as a road game because Syracuse is in New York. And obviously, Syracuse should have a little bit of the home field advantage. They're playing at Yankee Stadium. I believe that game will be being played at Yankee Stadium. Now, then they have a Thursday game, which they should win against Boston College, and then I believe they'll take down Duke in the last week of the season to finish 8-4 and 5-3 in the ACC. Their defense, again, they have probably the best defensive cornerback duo in all of college football, possibly in the ACC. They have one of the best, man. They have MJ Devonshire and Marquise Williams. They also have a stud senior linebackers in Shane Simon and Bengali Kamara. Phil Jurkovich is a brand new quarterback. He's coming in from Boston College. He's transferring. He got injured late in the season last year, but he's a solid quarterback and should help the offense get better. If the offensive line holds up, then the Pitt offense could be pretty good because you have Gavin Bartholomew, who's a solid tight end, and you have Rodney Hammond, who is a solid running back as well. So overall, I see Pitt finishing 8-4 and 5-3 in the ACC. 4 teams to go. Bear with me, people. We got Syracuse next. Syracuse, they had a really good year a few years ago with Dino Babers. I believe that was in 2020 or 2021. But ever since then, it's just gone downhill, man. He's in his 8th year with a 36-49 record in the at his time at Syracuse. Excuse me. Now, last season they finished 7-6 in the ACC, and they lost the Pinstripe Bowl to Minnesota. They should get 3 wins from their non-conference slate, but they have a rough 3-game stretch from the Clemson game all the way to the Florida State game. Now, if you're looking at realistic expectations, then I would say this Syracuse team could get at the most seven wins during the season. I project them to finish 6-6 and 3-5 in the ACC. I'm gonna try to speed a little bit faster because we're nearly 50 minutes into this audio recording. So I see them starting off 2-0 versus Colgate and versus Western Michigan. Then I see them losing to Purdue. Then they'll beat Army to start 3-1. But then they're gonna drop to 3-4 before the bye week because they gotta play Clemson, North Carolina, and Florida State. I don't think they have a chance in any of those 3 games. But then I see them picking up 2 straight wins after the bye week at Virginia Tech and versus Boston College. I see them losing to Pitt in the Bronx. Okay. As a matter of fact, I see them beating Pitt at the Bronx. I apologize. When doing the slide, I was supposed to highlight that game as in green for a win, but I highlighted that as a loss. I'll go back and I'll edit this slide again. But I had them at 6-6, but really I should have them at 7-5. I see them beating Pitt, I see them beating Georgia Tech, and I see them losing to Wake Forest in the last game of the season. So I said 6-6 originally. That was by accident. It's really 7-5. Before I upload this video, I'll edit this slide again and I'll put it in the video. But yeah, I see them finishing 7-5 and 4-4 in the ACC. Now, for Virginia, I don't really got to talk too much about Virginia. Unfortunately, last year they only played 10 games. They canceled the last 2 games of the season because they had a horrendous accident where 3 football players died in a school shooting at the University of Virginia. Just a lot of bad stuff that happened last season. This team is head coached by Tony Elliott. He went 3-7 last year and 1-6 in the ACC. It's a rough non-conference schedule, man. And they should not be favored in any games this season except for their win against William and Mary. Their realistic expectations, really, the most wins I could see them getting is 3 wins at the most. I do not see. I don't see, Virginia doing very well. I see them finishing 1-10, and as you can see, I have them losing every game on here besides the William and Mary game on October 7th. They're one of the worst teams in this conference, and they're going to be that way for the next few years. So yeah, I see Virginia finishing 1-10 and 0-8 in the ACC. Not much to talk about here. And then Virginia Tech, I'm also going to go through these guys as well. Virginia Tech, they're coached by Brent Pry. They only played 11 games last season. They had the last game canceled against Virginia because of that horrific accident that happened over there. Virginia Tech, they finished 3-8 last season, 1-6 in the ACC. They should get up to 3 wins with their non-conference schedule, but the only game that is really a 50-50 game is against Virginia. When it comes to their ACC schedule, their realistic expectations, I have them winning 3 games at the most. They're gonna get 1 win, and I think they're way better than Virginia, so I believe that's a definite game. But as you can see here, the only other wins I have them getting is against Old Dominion and Marshall. And then the last team that we're going to talk about is Wake Forest. They're head coached by Dave Clawson. Really underrated head coach. He's coached 10 years now at Wake Forest. He has a 59-53 record. Last season, they won the Gasparilla Bowl versus Missouri. And when looking at their schedule, he should have 3 wins from the non-conference slate. Unfortunately, they have to face they got to face 4 top teams in the ACC. But I do think that they will have a good season this year. Sam Hartman is gone. He transferred. I believe he transferred, but he's gone. So they have a new quarterback now, and that's Mitch Griffiths, who's a sophomore. I still think that Wake Forest is going to put up a whole bunch of points. I don't see their offense regressing with the change at the quarterback position. They still have a lot of solid offensive weapons, including the wide receivers and Donovan Green and Taylor Morin, as well as Jamal Banks. So they have a really three-headed monster at wide receiver there. All those guys I just named are juniors. I see them starting off with 4-0. They have 2 bye weeks, which is weird. See them starting off 4-0 against Elon, Vanderbilt, Old Dominion, and Georgia Tech. That Vanderbilt game, they could lose, but I see them win that game. Then they're going to lose to Clemson. Then I see them beating Virginia Tech and Pittsburgh. Then they'll lose to Florida State and at Duke on a Thursday. I see them beating NC State. They'll lose to Notre Dame. And then in the last week of the season, they'll beat Syracuse. So I see Wake Forest finishing 8-4 overall and 5-3 in the ACC. Now, I just mentioned that I predicted Syracuse to beat Pitt, but I actually got confused here. No, as a matter of fact, no, I'm actually correct. I'll go, like I said, I'll go back and change the slides for Syracuse. Now, just to recap, I see Clemson and Florida State as the top 2 teams in the conference. They'll finish 1-2 respectively. Clemson will be 8-0 in the ACC, and Florida State will finish 7-1. Then I have North Carolina finishing 3rd with 6-2. Wake Forest will be 4th at 5-3. Pittsburgh will be 5th at 5-3. North Carolina State will be 500 and tied for 6th place, along with Miami, Duke, and Syracuse. Then I see Louisville finishing 9th. As a matter of fact, no. So teams 6 through 10 will finish 4-4 in the ACC. That's NC State, Miami, Duke, Louisville, and Syracuse. Then I see Georgia Tech finishing 2-6, Boston College finishing 2-6, Virginia finishing 1-7, or Virginia Tech finishing 1-7, and then the Virginia Cavaliers finishing winless in conference play, which means Virginia is last place in the ACC. And in the ACC Championship, I actually have Florida State beating Clemson. I do think that Clemson's going to win the regular season matchup, but I think that Florida State will meet Clemson for the ACC title game late in the season. I believe that they'll get back at Clemson and they'll even the score at 1 game apiece. So I see Florida State winning the ACC this year in the 2023 season. And that's what I have for you today. So like I said, I'll go back and I'll change the Syracuse slide before I upload this video. I apologize for the confusion with that game against Pittsburgh for Syracuse, but I do see them finishing 4-4 in the conference. So like I said, I see Florida State finishing as the ACC champion. It's been a long 52-minute talk. I apologize for taking too much of your time. Hopefully, you guys have enough time to go through this. I'll put the timestamps in the description below for each individual teams and how I'm going to talk about them. I'll put the timestamps for each team in the description below. I hope you enjoyed this ACC football prediction preview. Like I said, I'm not perfect, but I do believe that all of my predictions for each of these teams are somewhat relatable to the predictions of the quote-unquote experts. So I hope you enjoyed my ACC 2023 predictions for this upcoming college football season. I'm Justin Perez for the Air Raid Saturdays College Football YouTube channel, and I'll catch you on the flip side. Please remember to subscribe so you can keep up with all my latest content here on this channel. I have a lot of big plans for this channel coming up very soon, especially after I finish these 2023 predictions for every single FBS team. So have a good night, take care, and I'll see you on the flip side.